The starship, Eagle's Resolve, drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its sleek metallic frame reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Captain Robert Hayes stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the monitors that lined the walls. The mission had been routine, a patrol along the outer rim of the Orion Quadrant, but something about the quiet felt uneasy. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came with peace. It was the kind that made your skin crawl. Lieutenant. Karen Blake sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she ran another sweep of the surrounding area. She was a calm woman, usually unshaken by anything, but even she felt the weight of the silence pressing down on them. Beside her, Chief Engineer Alan Doyle leaned forward, squinting at the sensor readings displayed on his screen, his brow furrowed, deeper with each passing second. "Anything unusual?" Hayes asked, breaking the stillness with his low voice. Alan glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Not sure yet, Captain. There's something out there, but it's fuzzy, like it doesn't want to be seen." Karen nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on her own display. "I'm picking up an energy signature coming from the asteroid field. Head. It's weak, though. Could just be interference from the rocks." Hayes crossed his arms and turned toward the main viewport. The asteroid field loomed in the distance, a chaotic jumble of jagged stones tumbling endlessly through the toward. It wasn't uncommon for ships to hide among such debris, but the Empire hadn't reported any activity in this sector recently. Still, something about the energy reading nagged at him. "Take us closer," he ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The ship hummed softly as Karen adjusted their course, steering them toward the heart of the asteroid field. The crew worked quietly, their movements precise and practiced. Everyone knew better than to question Hayes's decisions. He'd earned their trust long ago. As they approached, the sensors began to pick up more details. The energy signature grew stronger, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Alan leaned closer to his screen, muttering under his breath. "This isn't natural. Whatever it is, it's artificial." Karen frowned, her fingers flying over the controls, again. "If it's a ship, it's huge, bigger than anything I've ever seen before." Hayes stepped forward, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. "Can you get a visual?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Negative, sir. It's cloaked, or at least partially shielded. We can't pinpoint its exact location." The tension on the bridge thickened. No one spoke, but the unease was palpable. Cloaked ships weren't unheard of, but they were rare, and almost always associated with hostile forces. The thought sent a chill through the room. "Keep scanning," Hayes said firmly. "And stay alert. If it moves, I want to know immediately." For several minutes, the only sounds were the soft beeps of the instruments and the occasional crackle of static from the comm system. Then, without warning, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the bridge. "What was that?" Hayes demanded, gripping the edge of a console for balance. Alan was already typing furiously. "Something just passed us. Fast. Too fast to track properly." Karen spun around in her seat, her face pale. "It came from the asteroid field. Whatever it is, it's close." Before anyone could respond, the view screen flickered to life. At first, all they saw was darkness. Then, slowly, a shape emerged, a massive, shadowy form drifting silently between the asteroids. Its surface shimmered faintly as if it were made of liquid metal rather than solid material. The design was unlike anything they'd encountered before, sleek and alien with no visible engines or weapons. "It's moving," Karen whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. "But it shouldn't be able to move like that." The object accelerated suddenly, disappearing from view in the blink of an eye. Just as quickly, it reappeared farther away, hovering near the edge of the asteroid field. Smaller shapes detached from its hull, darting outward, like insects swarming from a hive. They moved with unnatural speed, zigzagging erratically before locking onto nearby Imperial vessels. One by one, the smaller ships unleashed beams of light that struck their targets with devastating precision. The Empire's fleet scrambled to respond, but their attempts were futile. Their weapons couldn't lock onto the attackers and their shields collapsed under the relentless assault. Ships exploded in bright flashes, sending debris spiraling into the void. On the Eagle's resolve, panic began to set in. Crew members shouted orders, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Hayes raised a hand, silencing them with a single gesture. "We need to fall back," he said, his tone steady despite the chaos. "Now." Karen didn't hesitate. Her hands flew over the controls, plotting a retreat vector, while Alan worked to boost the ship's speed. Behind them, the mysterious craft continued its relentless advance, its smaller counterparts picking off stragglers with ruthless efficiency. As they pulled away, Hayes activated the distress signal, broadcasting a warning to command. "Unknown hostiles in the Orion Quadrant. Retreat immediately. Repeat. Unknown hostiles." His words were cut short as another tremor rocked the ship. One of the smaller vessels had broken off from the main group, chasing them now. Its movements were erratic, unpredictable, making it nearly impossible to evade. "Shields are holding for now," Alan called out, sweat beading on his forehead. "But if they hit us again, we're done for." Hayes clenched his jaw, his mind racing. They couldn't outrun it, not with the damage they'd already sustained. And fighting back seemed equally hopeless. Their weapons wouldn't penetrate, whatever shielding the enemy used. "Karen," he said sharply, "can you plot a slipstream jump?" She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the controls. "It's risky, Captain. If we miscalculate, we'll tear ourselves apart." "Do it anyway," he ordered. "We don't have a choice." She nodded grimly and began inputting coordinates, her hands trembling slightly. The rest of the crew braced themselves as the ship's engines roared to life, straining against the strain of the maneuver. Behind them, the pursuing vessel fired again, its beam grazing the Eagle's Resolve's aft section. Sparks erupted from consoles and smoke filled the air, but somehow the shields held. Seconds later, the ship lurched forward, plunging into the swirling vortex of a slipstream. When they emerged on the other side, the asteroid field and the ghostly ship were gone. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, slumping into their seats as the adrenaline began to fade. But Hayes remained standing, his expression grim. "They're out there," he said quietly, staring at the empty void beyond the viewport. "And they're not going to stop." No one argued with him. They all knew he was right. The Eagle's Resolve limped back to the nearest Imperial outpost, its hull scarred and systems barely holding together. Captain Robert Hayes stood in the briefing room, his face drawn with exhaustion. Around the table sat Admiral Linda Grant, a stern woman with sharp features, and several other high-ranking officers. The mood was tense, the air thick with unspoken questions. Admiral Grant leaned forward, her piercing gaze fixed on Hayes. "Report," she said simply, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Hayes straightened, pushing aside his fatigue. He recounted the events in detail. The mysterious energy signature, the ghostly ship, the devastating attack on the fleet. As he spoke, the room grew quieter, the weight of his words sinking in. When he finished, no one moved or spoke for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Grant broke the silence. "You're telling me there's an unidentified threat out there capable of wiping out our ships without warning, and we have no idea what it is?" Hayes nodded grimly. "That's correct, ma'am. Whatever this thing is, it's beyond anything we've encountered before. Its technology is advanced, beyond advanced." One of the officers, a man named Commander Paul Simmons, shook his head. "It doesn't make sense. How could something like that exist without us knowing? We've mapped most of this quadrant. There shouldn't be any surprises left." "That's what I thought too," Hayes admitted. "But it's out there, and it's not going away." Admiral Grant tapped her fingers on the table, her expression unreadable. After a pause, she turned to another officer sitting at the far end of the room. "Dr. Emily Stone, do you have anything to add?" Dr. Stone shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was a slight woman with curly brown hair and glasses perched on her nose. Though she wasn't military, her expertise as a xenobiologist had earned her a place in the meeting. "Well," she began hesitantly, Based on the data Captain Hayes provided, I noticed something unusual. The energy readings from the attack contained traces of organic material. Organic? Admiral Grant repeated, raising an eyebrow. Yes, Dr. Stone confirmed. Not human or any known species, but definitely biological. It suggests that whatever we're dealing with might not be entirely mechanical. It could be some kind of hybrid, part machine, part living organism. The room fell silent again as everyone processed this revelation. The idea of facing an enemy that blurred the line between life and technology was unsettling, to say the least. Admiral Grant finally spoke, her tone firm. We need answers, and we need them now. She turned back to Hayes. Captain, you'll lead a reconnaissance mission into the asteroid field where the attack occurred. Your objective is to gather as much intelligence as possible about this thing. Dr. Stone will accompany you to analyze any findings. Hayes nodded, though his expression remained grim. Understood, ma'am. Commander Simmons frowned. With respect, Admiral, sending one ship into hostile territory seems reckless. If that thing is still out there, we don't have time to assemble. A full fleet, Admiral Grant interrupted. Every hour we delay gives it more time to prepare. Besides, the Eagle's resolve is fast and agile. If anyone can handle this, it's Hayes and his crew. Simmons didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he glanced at Hayes, who gave him a curt nod before turning to leave the room. Back aboard the Eagle's Resolve. Preparations were already underway. Karen Blake sat in the navigation chair, reviewing the coordinates for their return trip to the asteroid field. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the data, though she tried to hide it. Alan Doyle worked beside her, running diagnostics on the ship's engines and shields. You okay? Alan asked quietly, noticing her unease. Karen forced a smile. Yeah, just thinking about what happened last time. What if it's still there? What if it comes after us again? Alan shrugged, though his own worry was evident. Then, we'll deal with it. We've got no choice, right? Besides, we've got Dr. Stone now. Maybe she can figure out how to fight it, or at least talk to it. Karen sighed, leaning back in her chair. I hope so. Because if not... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Captain Hayes entered the bridge, followed closely by Dr. Stone. Both looked tired but determined. Status report, Hayes ordered, taking his position at the center of the room. All systems are green, Alan replied. Shields are patched up, and the engines are holding steady. We're ready to go whenever you are. Hayes nodded, then turned to Karen. Set course for the asteroid field. Let's see what we're dealing with. Aye, sir, Karen said, her voice steadier now. She input the final commands, and the ship lurched forward as it entered hyperspace. The journey back to the asteroid field took longer than expected, giving the crew plenty of time to think and worry. Dr. Stone spent most of her time in the lab, poring over the data collected during the first encounter. She emerged only occasionally to share updates, her excitement growing with each new discovery. I think I'm onto something, she told Hayes during one such update. The organic material in the energy readings matches patterns found in certain deep space organisms. It's possible these aliens, assuming they're aliens, are using bioengineering to enhance their technology. Hayes raised an eyebrow. So they're not just machines, they're alive. In a way, yes, Dr. Stone explained. Think of them as symbiotic entities, part machine, part creature. That would explain why their movements are so fluid, almost organic. Hayes rubbed his temples, trying to process the implications. If they're alive, does that mean they can communicate or reason? It's possible, Dr. Stone admitted, but until we meet them face to face, we won't know for sure. As the ship neared its destination, the tension aboard the Eagle's Resolve reached a fever pitch. Karen monitored the sensors closely, her eyes glued to the screens. Alan double-checked every system, ensuring they were prepared for anything. Even Dr. Stone seemed nervous, clutching a datapad filled with notes and theories. When they arrived, the asteroid field looked exactly as it had before, silent, desolate, and seemingly empty. But this time, the crew knew better. They scanned the area thoroughly, searching for any sign of the mysterious vessel. "There," Karen exclaimed suddenly, pointing to her screen. "Energy spike, same as last time. It's coming from deep within the field." Hayes stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Take us in slowly. Keep the shields up and weapons ready." The ship maneuvered cautiously through the debris, its sensors scanning every shadow. As they drew closer to the source of the signal, the ghostly ship appeared once more, silent, massive, and utterly alien. This time, however, it didn't move immediately. Instead, it hovered motionless, watching them. "What's it doing?" Alan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the ship projected a series of strange symbols onto the view screen. They pulsed faintly, shifting colors in a hypnotic rhythm. Dr. Stone gasped, her eyes wide. "It's communicating. Can you understand it?" Hayes asked sharply. "Not yet," she admitted. "But give me a moment. I might be able to decode it." As she worked, the ghostly ship launched small drones toward the Eagle's resolve. These drones emitted pulses that disrupted the ship's systems, causing alarms to blare and lights to flicker. Alan cursed under his breath, rushing to stabilize the engines while Karen struggled to maintain control of the navigation. "Hayes!" Alan shouted over the chaos. "We can't hold out much longer." Hayes clenched his fists, his mind racing. Then, remembering Dr. Stone's earlier comment, he turned to Karen. "Send a response. Something simple, a mathematical sequence. See if it reacts." Karen hesitated, then nodded. She typed quickly, transmitting a basic numerical pattern back to the alien ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the drones halted their assault and retreated. The ghostly ship sent one final transmission, a single, echoing sound, before vanishing once more. Dr. Stone stared at her datapad, her hands trembling. It's a map," she whispered. "They want us to follow them." Hayes exchanged glances with his crew, the gravity of the situation settling over them. Whatever lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain: their journey was far from over. The decision to follow the map left behind by the ghostly ship weighed heavily on Captain Robert Hayes. He stood alone on the bridge of the Eagle's resolve, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The coordinates provided by the alien transmission led deep into uncharted space, a region marked only by voids and anomalies on imperial charts. It was a gamble, one that could end in disaster. Yet staying behind felt like an even greater risk. Whatever these beings were, they had made their intentions clear. Humanity was encroaching on something it didn't understand. Dr. Emily Stone joined him moments later, clutching her datapad tightly. Her face was pale but determined. "Captain," she began softly, "if we're going to do this, I need time to prepare. There's no telling what kind of environment we'll encounter." Hayes nodded without looking at her. "You'll have whatever you need. Just tell me how long." "A few hours," she replied. "I've been analyzing the symbols they sent us. They seem to encode environmental data, temperature, radiation levels, gravity fluctuations. If we adjust our shielding accordingly, we might stand a better chance of surviving." "Good work," Hayes said, finally turning to face her. "Make it happen, and keep me updated." As Dr. Stone hurried off to the lab, Hayes called a meeting with his senior crew, Lieutenant Karen Blake, Chief Engineer Alan Doyle, and a handful of others gathered around the central console. The air was tense, each person silently wrestling with their own fears about what lay ahead. "We're following the map," Hayes announced bluntly. "Dr. Stone believes it leads to some kind of rendezvous point. She's working on adapting our systems to handle whatever conditions we might face." Karen frowned, her fingers tapping nervously against the edge of the console. "Do we really think this is wise? What if it's a trap?" "It probably is," Hayes admitted. "But staying here isn't an option either. That thing, it's not just a ship, it's intelligent, maybe even sentient. If we don't try to understand it, we're sitting ducks." Alan rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uneasy. "Even if we prep everything, there's no guarantee we'll survive. Those drones nearly tore us apart last time. We got lucky they stopped when they did. I know, Hayes said firmly. But luck won't save us forever. Sometimes you have to take risks to find answers. Are you with me? No one spoke for a moment, but eventually nods came from around the room. Reluctant agreement, but agreement nonetheless. Hours passed as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare the ship. Dr. Stone coordinated with Alan to modify the Eagle's Resolve's shields, reinforcing them against unknown threats. Karen plotted the course based on the alien map, double and triple checking every calculation. By the time they were ready to depart, exhaustion hung over everyone like a thick fog. The journey into the unknown began quietly. For the first few hours, nothing seemed unusual. The stars outside the viewport stretched and blurred as the ship traveled faster than light. But as they neared the destination, strange phenomena began to occur. Time itself seemed distorted. Seconds stretched into minutes, and minutes collapsed into seconds. Alarms blared intermittently, triggered by glitches in the ship's internal clock. "What's happening?" Karen asked, her voice tight with frustration as she struggled to stabilize the navigation system. "I don't know," Alan muttered, frantically typing commands into his console. "It's like the ship doesn't know where or when it is anymore." Dr. Stone stepped forward, her eyes wide with fascination rather than fear. "It's the dimensional shift," she explained. "The Vinra, they exist between dimensions. Their technology manipulates space-time. We're crossing into their territory now." "Great," Alan grumbled. "Just great." Despite the chaos, the ship held together. As they emerged from the distortion, the crew found themselves in a region unlike anything they'd ever seen. A dying star loomed in the distance, its light dim and flickering. Orbiting the star was a massive structure. Not quite a planet, not quite a station. It pulsed faintly, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "That's it," Karen whispered, pointing at the view screen. "That's where the map led us." Hayes studied the structure carefully. It looked alive, almost organic, with tendrils extending outward like roots. Smaller ships drifted lazily around it, their forms identical to the ghostly vessel they had encountered before. None of them moved to intercept the Eagle's Resolve, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. "Let's see if we can get closer," Hayes ordered. "Keep the shields up and stay sharp." As they approached, the structure emitted a low hum that reverberated through the ship. The sound was unsettling, sending shivers down everyone's spines. Dr. Stone leaned closer to her instruments, her expression growing more intense. "There are life signs," she murmured. "Faint, but definitely there. They're everywhere." Inside the structure. "Do you think they know we're here?" Alan asked, glancing nervously at the view screen. "They must," Hayes replied. "They brought us here for a reason." Before anyone could respond, a beam of light shot out from the structure, enveloping the Eagle's Resolve. The ship shuddered violently, but strangely, no damage occurred. Instead, the crew felt a strange sensation, as though they were being scanned, probed at a level deeper than physical. "They're studying us," Dr. Stone said, her voice filled with awe. "Learning about us." The beam faded after several agonizing seconds, leaving the crew disoriented but unharmed. Moments later, a message appeared on the view screen, a series of symbols similar to those sent earlier, but accompanied by a single word-like sound. It resonated deeply, as though it carried meaning beyond language. Dr. Stone gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "They're inviting us inside." "You sure about that?" Alan asked skeptically. "Because it looks more like they're trying to eat us." "No," she insisted. "This is communication. They want us to come closer, to meet them." Hayes considered her words carefully. Trusting the aliens was risky, but ignoring their invitation might provoke hostility. "We'll send a landing party," he decided. "Minimal crew, just enough to make contact." Karen immediately volunteered, as did Alan and Dr. Stone. Hayes hesitated but ultimately agreed, knowing their expertise would be crucial. Together, the four of them suited up and boarded a shuttlecraft, leaving the safety of the Eagle's Resolve behind. The interior of the structure was unlike anything they'd imagined. The walls shimmered and shifted, pulsating with colors that defied description. Strange shapes floated in the air, moving in patterns that seemed deliberate yet incomprehensible. The air itself felt thick, almost suffocating, though their suits protected them. Then they saw them. The Vinra, the Dur. Beings were translucent, their forms blending seamlessly with the environment. They appeared neither solid nor gaseous, existing somewhere in between. Some floated gracefully while others remained stationary, observing the humans with what seemed like detached curiosity. One of the Vinra approached, its form shifting, subtly as it moved. It projected another series of symbols, this time directly into their minds. Dr. Stone staggered under the weight of the mental intrusion, clutching her helmet as tears streamed down her face. "It's okay," she managed to choke out. "They're showing me things. Images. Concepts." "What kind of concepts?" Hayes demanded, keeping his weapon trained on the nearest Vinra despite the futility of such an action. "They're explaining their existence," Dr. Stone replied haltingly. "They live between dimensions, feeding off the energy of dying stars. Our expansion, our interference, it disrupts their balance. They attacked because they felt threatened." Hayes lowered his weapon slightly, his expression grim. "So what? Now? Do they want us to leave? To stop exploring?" Dr. Stone shook her head, still trembling. "Not exactly. They're asking us to coexist, to respect their boundaries. But they also warned us if we continue unchecked, they'll have no choice but to act." The realization hit Hayes like a punch to the gut. Humanity's relentless pursuit of progress had brought them to the brink of conflict with a species far older and more advanced than themselves. Whether they liked it or not, the future of both races depended on finding common ground. "We'll relay their message," Hayes said finally, "and hope the Empire listens." For now, peace hung precariously in the balance. But as the shuttlecraft returned to the Eagle's Resolve, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The return journey to Imperial space felt longer than the trip to the alien structure. The weight of what they had learned pressed heavily on Captain Robert Hayes and his crew. Each member of the landing party carried their own burden, but none more so than Dr. Emily Stone. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying the images and sensations the Vinra had shared with her. She sat in the lab, staring blankly at her datapad, trying to piece together everything she had experienced. Karen Blake walked in quietly, noticing the distant look in Dr. Stone's eyes. "You okay?" she asked gently, leaning against the doorway. "Doctor," Stone blinked, pulling herself back to reality. "I don't know," she admitted. "What we saw, it's hard to put into words. They're not like us, not entirely. They exist in a way that's beyond human understanding." Karen nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll let us live in peace if we follow their rules?" "They didn't give us much of a choice," Dr. Stone replied. "But yes, I believe they want coexistence." Their message was clear: respect their boundaries or face the consequences. "They're not evil, they're just different." Karen sighed, crossing her arms. "Different doesn't mean safe. If the Empire doesn't listen, we could be heading for war." Hayes entered the room then, his expression unreadable. "How's it coming?" he asked, glancing at Dr. Stone. "I've documented as much as I can," she said, holding up her datapad. "Their language, their biology, their technology, it's all here. But whether anyone will believe it is another matter." "We'll make them believe," Hayes said firmly. "This isn't just about us anymore, it's about survival for both sides." When the Eagle's Resolve finally docked at the nearest Imperial outpost, Admiral Linda Grant was waiting for them. Her presence alone signaled the gravity of the situation. She greeted Hayes and his crew with a mixture of relief and impatience, her sharp eyes scanning their weary faces. "Report," she demanded, wasting no time on pleasantries. Hayes stepped forward, his posture rigid. "We made contact, ma'am. The beings call themselves the Venra. They're not machines or ships. They're living organisms that exist between dimensions. Their existence depends on the energy of dying stars. Admiral Grant raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. And they attacked our fleet because they see us as a threat, Hayes explained. Our expansion disrupts their balance. They attacked to protect themselves, not out of malice. But they've offered us a chance to coexist if we agree to respect their territory. Grant's expression hardened. Respect their territory? You're asking me to tell the Empire to halt its expansion based on the word of aliens we barely understand? It's not just my word, Hayes countered. Dr. Stone has gathered evidence, their technology, their biology, it's all real. And if we ignore them, they'll retaliate. We wouldn't stand a chance. Dr. Stone stepped forward, holding out her data pad. Here's everything we learned, Admiral. Their message is clear. They want peace, but they won't tolerate further interference. Grant took the data pad reluctantly, scrolling through the information. Her frown deepened with each passing moment. Finally, she looked up. This changes nothing. The Empire has plans, colonization efforts, resource extraction missions, all of which would encroach on their territory. Convincing command to change course won't be easy. But it's necessary, Hayes insisted. If we push them too far, they'll destroy us. You saw what they did to our fleet. Imagine that on a larger scale. Grant hesitated, her gaze flickering, between Hayes and Dr. Stone. After a long pause, she nodded curtly. Fine. I'll present this to the Council, but don't expect miracles. Politics moves slower than threats. The meeting with the Council was tense, to say the least. Admiral Grant stood before a group of high-ranking officials, laying out the findings from the Eagle's resolve. Dr. Stone accompanied her, providing additional details and answering questions. The room buzzed with murmurs as the Council members debated the implications. Commander Paul Simmons, who had been present during the initial briefing, spoke up. Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, how do we know they're telling the truth? For all we know, this could be a ploy to weaken us. That's ridiculous, Dr. Stone snapped, surprising even herself with her boldness. They had every opportunity to destroy us when we met them. Instead, they chose to communicate, to warn us. That's not the act of an enemy. It's the act of a species trying to protect itself. Simmons scowled but didn't argue further. Other council members chimed in, some siding with Grant and Stone, others dismissing their claims outright. The debate dragged on for hours, growing increasingly heated. Finally, Admiral Grant slammed her fist on the table, silencing the room. Enough. We can argue semantics all day, but the fact remains, we have no choice but to take this seriously. Whether you believe it or not, the Vinra are real, and if we ignore them, we risk annihilation. Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Slowly, the council began to nod in agreement. A decision was reached. A delegation would be sent to meet with the Vinra, carrying a formal proposal for coexistence. In the meantime, all operations near the identified territories would be suspended. Back aboard the Eagle's Resolve, the crew prepared for the next phase of their mission. The delegation included diplomats, scientists, and military personnel, all tasked with establishing a fragile bridge between humanity and the Vinra. Dr. Stone worked tirelessly to ensure the team understood the cultural nuances of the aliens, while Hayes coordinated logistics with Karen and Alan. As they set course for the alien structure once more, tension lingered among the crew. No one knew how the Vinra would react to the delegation, or if they would even accept it. The possibility of failure loomed large, casting a shadow over their efforts. Karen voiced her concerns during a quiet moment on the bridge. What if they don't trust us? What if this whole thing falls apart? Hayes placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We've done everything we can. Now it's up to them, and us, to find a way forward. Alan joined them, shaking his head. Still can't believe we're trusting aliens who wiped out half our fleet. They gave us a chance, Hayes reminded him. That's more than most would have done. We owe it to them, and to ourselves, to try. When they arrived at the alien structure, the Vinra were waiting. Their translucent forms shimmered faintly, exuding an aura of calm authority. The delegation disembarked cautiously, holding up devices designed to broadcast their intentions peacefully. Dr. Stone stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We've come to talk, to find a way for both our peoples to live in harmony." One of the Vinra approached, its form rippling as it moved. It projected a series of symbols, accompanied by a low hum that resonated in everyone's minds. "Doctor," Stone translated quickly, relaying their response. "They're willing to listen," she announced. "But they're watching us closely. One wrong move, and this ends." The negotiations began, slow and painstaking. Misunderstandings arose frequently, forcing both sides to adapt and compromise. Hours turned into days as the humans and Vinra worked to bridge the gap between their vastly different perspectives. Through it all, Hayes watched silently, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the fate of two species rested on these fragile discussions. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for now, there was hope. A fragile, tenuous hope that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity and the Vinra could find a way to share the stars. The negotiations with the Vinra stretched on for days, each session more grueling than the last. The humans and the aliens communicated through a mix of symbols, gestures, and mental projections, with Dr. Emily Stone acting as the primary translator. Her role was exhausting, requiring her to constantly interpret abstract concepts that had no direct equivalents in human language. Despite the challenges, progress was made, slowly but surely. Captain Robert Hayes observed everything. From a distance, his presence both a reassurance and a reminder of the stakes. He trusted Dr. Stone's abilities, but he couldn't shake the feeling that one misstep could unravel everything they had worked for. The Vinra were patient, almost unnervingly so, but their calm demeanor masked an underlying tension. They were watching, always watching, ready to act if humanity failed to meet their expectations. On the fourth day, a breakthrough came. One of the Vinra projected a map, a detailed representation of their territory, marked with boundaries they expected humanity to respect. It included vast regions of space, some rich in resources that the Empire had already earmarked for colonization. The implications were clear. Complying with these demands would require significant sacrifices. Admiral Linda Grant, who had joined the delegation, frowned deeply as she reviewed the map. "This is unacceptable," she muttered under her breath. "We can't just abandon entire sectors. The economic impact alone would be catastrophic." Dr. Stone turned to her, her voice firm despite her fatigue. "If we don't agree, there won't be an economy left to worry about. The Vinra aren't negotiating, they're setting terms. We either accept them or face the consequences." Grant clenched her jaw, clearly torn between duty and pragmatism. After a long pause, she nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we'll need time to present this to the Council and implement changes. This won't happen overnight." The Vinra seemed to understand, their forms rippling softly in what might have been approval. Another series of symbols appeared, translated by Dr. Stone as a temporary truce. For now, the Vinra would hold back, giving humanity time to adjust. But the message was clear. Failure to comply would result in swift and decisive action. Back aboard the Eagle's Resolve, the crew prepared for the return journey to Imperial headquarters. The mood was somber, the weight of the mission pressing down on everyone. Lieutenant Karen Blake sat quietly at her station, staring out at the stars. She couldn't help but wonder how the Empire would react to the news. Would they listen, or would pride and greed blind them to the reality of the situation? Chief Engineer Alan Doyle voiced similar concerns during a rare moment of downtime. "You really think they'll go along with this?" he asked Hayes, who stood nearby. "They've spent years planning expansions into those sectors. They're not going to give that up without a fight." "I don't know," Hayes admitted. "But it's out of our hands now. All we can do is deliver the message and hope they make the right choice." Alan sighed, shaking his head. "Hope doesn't feel like much of a plan." "It's all we've got," Hayes replied simply. When they reached headquarters, the reaction was mixed. Admiral Grant presented the findings to the council, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Some members listened intently, visibly shaken by the evidence. Others dismissed it outright, accusing the delegation of exaggerating the threat or being manipulated by the VINRA. Commander Paul Simmons led the opposition, his skepticism bordering on hostility. "We're talking about halting operations in key sectors based on the word of aliens we barely understand," he argued. "How do we even know they're telling the truth? What if this is all a trick to weaken us?" "They're not lying," Dr. Stone interjected, her voice rising with frustration. "I saw it myself, their technology, their biology, their way of life. They're not trying to deceive us. They're trying to survive, just like us." Simmons sneered. "Survival? That's convenient. Maybe they're just afraid of competition." "This isn't about competition," Hayes snapped, stepping forward. "It's about survival for both sides. If we push them too far, they'll retaliate, and trust me when I say we won't win that fight." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Finally, Admiral Grant spoke, her tone firm. "Enough. Whether you believe it or not, the facts are undeniable. Ignoring the VINRA will lead to disaster. Now, are we going to act like a civilized species, or are we going to let fear and greed dictate our actions?" Her words resonated with some, but not all. The council voted narrowly in favor of implementing the changes, though resistance remained strong. Plans were set in motion to halt operations in the designated sectors, and diplomatic envoys were dispatched to explain the situation to affected colonies. It was a fragile victory, one that relied heavily on continued cooperation and restraint. Weeks passed and the transition began. The Empire scaled back its activities in the contested regions, redirecting resources to other projects. Publicly, the move was framed as a strategic realignment, though whispers of the truth spread quickly among the populace. Reactions were mixed. Some praised the decision as a step toward peace, while others condemned it as weakness. For Hayes and his crew, the aftermath was bittersweet. They had done what they could, delivering the message and securing a temporary reprieve. But the future remained uncertain. Humanity's ability to coexist with the VINRA depended on sustained effort and mutual trust, qualities that were often in short supply. One evening, Hayes stood alone on the observation deck of the Eagle's Resolve, gazing out at the stars. Karen joined him after a while, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked softly. "The treaty, I mean." Hayes hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But it's a start. For the first time, we're acknowledging that we're not alone out here. That's something, at least." Karen nodded slowly. "Yeah. Something." They stood in silence for a while, lost in their own thoughts. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, vast and mysterious. Somewhere out there, the VINRA watched, waiting to see if humanity would honor its promises. As Hayes turned to leave, he glanced back at the stars one last time. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity had been given a second chance. Whether they chose to seize it or squander it was up to them.